Spark Infinity. How is everyone? We've got another conversation tonight, a mini spark, and it's with one of the amazing people that Wakefield Brewster brought into the group. It's Balam. How are you? I think you might be muted. Oh, you're not. How are you?
I'm wonderful. Thank you for having me, Dave. Thank you.
Y- Yeah, so great to have you. We had a chance to talk backstage a little bit before getting started today, but I think where I'd like to start with this is I know you do a little bit of music. What other things do you do? You seem to be, you strike me as someone who's multidisciplinary. So, what other things do you do in terms of creativity and art?
Well, I mean, primarily my passion is writing, but I think that that bleeds into a lot of stuff. And so, like, I do a lot of music. I do a lot of spoken word poetry. I do a lot of writing. Like, I'm an author as well. I write some fiction stories. I've written a book for children, and
Mm.
I try to live an example of a red man who exists within the red nation, and this is sort of like my performance piece is just existing as myself. So that's sort of what I do as an artist as far as my artistry.
Mm. I'm similar to you in the sense that writing has definitely brought me into a variety of different directions. Certainly, things that have to do with my career or my business in terms of ghostwriting or blog writing or freelance writing. Book writing I've done as well. But occasionally, stuff that's either just for fun or for community projects, presentations, things like that. So, yeah, really interesting. I love to hear that writing has brought you in so many different directions. What's the name of your children's book?
It's actually called Atitach Story, and it's available on my Instagram, so it's completely free. And that's sort of the platform that I chose to release it on. Um, it's a story about our relationship with grandmother Earth, told through the words of a Mayan grandmother. Um, and it's a poem that I think helps children gain a better understanding of our relationship with the land. So if you guys are so inclined on Instagram, it's free to read. So go ahead and check it out and let me know what you think. 'Cause, yeah.
Hmm. We'll have to get the link to your Instagram for sure. And, and as far as writing goes, like what is it about writing that you enjoy, that you love? Because I think if you don't love it, it's kind of a hard thing to do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I got into writing when I was younger, I'd say more like middle school, and I was really pushed by like one powerful teacher who she had read some poetry I'd written, so she encouraged me. She got me this book, and at the end of the year, she's like, "I want you to once it's full of poems, bring it back to me. I want to read them." And so every year I did that, grade 7, grade 8, grade 9, and she
Hmm.
cultivated this author inside of me, which just kind of never left. And being a fan of good writing as well. So being exposed to just some really great authors throughout the years, and then like creators of all sorts who happen to be writers as well. So that's like musicians and poets, and just constantly being in awe of this of the brilliance, which is the expression of the human through language. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
What are your feelings on the arrival of AI, which can now generate text in many forms, including stuff that looks like human writing?
Well, I mean, I don't think that it will ever replace like real writing or real tone or some of this stuff. Um, I think that it's definitely a tool to be considered. Like I don't see a big difference between having something that has the same capability of an editor and an actual editor like overseeing your work, which is what a lot of these applications are primarily focused on when it comes to like AI and literature.
Yeah.
So in that regard, like I mean, if it can go through the work faster and burn a person out less, then I don't see why it wouldn't be attractive in some regard. But the reality is, it will never replace the spirit of true writing. And I think that there's just a color and a tone to when things are authentic that make them original and make them good. So I'm here for both. Why not? AI
Hmm.
can be useful, but I don't think real writers are going anywhere anytime soon.
Mm. I like to believe that as well. I
Yeah.
think people who are especially skilled still have a place. In fact, they're more valued now because now a lot of companies understand, well, we can generate stuff with AI and some of it's okay, but the
Hmm.
value of a really great writer in their ability to tell stories and their opinions and their understanding and their lessons and to relay their experiences is still pretty well unsurpassed. You can make stuff that sounds really good with AI,
Hmm.
but it's more often than not trying to please the human rather than creating something that is uniquely creative. That's maybe just not a capability it has at this point.
No, and I mean, like it's really funny because you'll have people and they'll write something and it's totally in their own tone and their voice, and then they'll let it be touched by AI, and they think that they could pass it on to someone who knows what they sound like, and that but this is not you. This is something different, right? And again,
Yes.
so I think it has its place, but to believe that it lifts um the majority, like the heavy lifting, but in a sense that it's the stuff that makes it so unique and so good. I don't think that it'll be doing that anytime soon. I personally don't think so.
Mm. Now, for poetry, I feel like that's a very particular type of writing. I haven't really tried it yet. I think because I've written song lyrics, it's something that I could maybe transition into or attempt and see what I could come up with through practice. But is there a specific focus or subject of poetry that you like to focus on? And is there like a technique to it that everyone should know?
I mean, oh gosh, poetry is so subjective in the sense that I guess you could just about call anything poetry as long as you're willing to stand up in front of people and perform it. I think you might be able to get
Sure.
away. But I think, as far as my approach, like I've been influenced a lot by certain eras of writers, and I sort of have a less is more kind of approach to things, and I try to leverage literary devices in a way that I think are kind of simple and elegant, but poignant and powerful. So it's just something that I'm kind of known for. Where, like, I have one poem, for example, it's called "Tens of Thousands," and I'm talking about the children in the residential schools. And what it says: tens of thousands little babies lined up in a row, tens of thousands little babies never going home. Tens of thousands little babies with spirits so pure. Tens of thousands little babies. How could we allow this to occur? So it's sort of like the use of repetition and the somberness that brings sort of like that spirit to the piece, right? And
Yeah.
that's sort of been my approach with writing, at least for the past bit. My first book was a bit wordy, but I think after that one, I started kind of adopting the style that I'm talking about now.
Mm. I think literary devices is where my personal weakness is. I grew up in Japan, so from about kindergarten to grade eight, which means I missed out on things like what is a verb, what is an adjective. I tried to memorize that stuff, and I've tried multiple times, and I still don't get it. I know a little bit about similes and metaphors, but that stuff is my weakness. Probably no one would suspect after me pushing out 11 books to this point, but you know, I guess we all have our blind spots, as it were.
Well, I remember when I first released my first book, and I had a friend of mine, and he's got a doctorate in writing, and
Mm,
he told me, he's like, I think now I have the courage to release a book, and I just laughed because there's no qualification or anything that
no.
just like you said, like at times you kind of look back at what you yourself can accomplish, and you're just like, oh yeah, I did that,
Yeah.
because yeah, writing is just sort of its own living, breathing thing that way. It's so hard to put a cap on it, to put it in a container, to say what writing really is. In so many ways, we have our classifications as far as poetry goes, but I mean, like, at what point does song and poetry become the same? They kind of
Hmm.
bleed over, and I think that's a important exploration in our indigenous culture. Like when we sing, we were also praying. So
Mm.
it's another level that we add onto the poetry as well, because these words are powerful. They're repetitions as well, right? So
Yeah. I think that's really important to like, and I think that's an encouragement to any of our aspiring writers out there. Just the notion that you can do just about anything you want. You're welcome to break the rules. Many writers have. Some don't use capitalized letters for whatever reason. Some don't use punctuation for whatever reason. I've seen that too. And so it still ends up being, is it something the reader enjoys or is it something fulfilling to you? For
Mm,
me, at least, that's where I always start is like, is it fulfilling to me? And then I'll start thinking about, can this also be valuable to the reader? Since I write so many how-to manuals and things like that, that's important to me that the reader will be able to translate this into real life action.
mm. Yeah, I mean, comprehension is a whole nother branch of the whole literature game where it's just
Yeah.
I there's authors that I just simply love where I revisited work and I didn't comprehend that the way that I thought I did, or you'll read I remember when I was younger and I'd read a book and I'd go back and I'd look at all the reviews and what everyone else had kind of said about the book, and then all of a sudden oh my gosh, was I reading the same book as them? So I think comprehension is such a big part of it, and that's the skill of it too, right? Where it's like you make something that's digestible and
Mm.
tangible for people. Not everyone can learn from a book. So if you have the ability to do so in a way that you've reached like, a modicum of success, I'm sure you're onto something. So
Mm.
I could learn from you. And all writers, we're students as well. I think
Yes.
there's a scholarly aspect of it. So no matter what type of writing you encounter, if you're truly passionate about it, like you're always learning. And I mean, that's kind of how I look at what you're telling me about your self-help books, or maybe your how-to books,
Yeah.
which are just like, it's powerful, being able to instruct people through words. So, and I learned myself through books. Good. So thank you very much.
Very well said. I do still read lots of books, so you're spot on. I remain a student. I love what you said about comprehension as well. Isn't that the truth? Something I learned from my coaches was definitely spaced repetition. So coming back to something, it could be a week from now, it could be 3 months from now, it could be 3 years from now. But returning to a book you've already read or returning to an audio program you already listened to, there's always something new waiting for you because you've changed in between the
Mm,
time that it took you to get there. And that's a really magical thing about books and audio programs and things like that.
yeah, for sure. I know that there's a couple comfort books that I personally have that I go back to where I'm like, oh, this is nice to touch again. But I'll notice a little something about it that I didn't notice the first four times that I read it.
Yeah.
And it's nice to be able to surprise yourself to know that, the magic of writing and reading happens right there on the page, right in front of you, every single time you choose to engage. So I wholeheartedly am right there with you with that one.
Hmm. What books do you like to go back to again and again?
My favorite piece of repeated prose, and he's the king of the run-on sentence, but my absolute favorite author is Thomas Pynchon. And,
Hmm.
I go to Gravity's Rainbow often, um, because it's just such a beautiful wordy piece, and there's times where I just have tried to get away with stuff like that, and it doesn't come out the same way, and you just realize there's a mastery and a beauty to it, and there's a frankness to it yeah, it's something else. I don't know if you've had the pleasure of reading any of Thomas Pynchon's stuff, but I really recommend it. It's really good.
I will have to. I spent a lot of time in nonfiction. So certainly the biographies of the successful, but a lot of marketing, leadership, personal development, self-help, music business, spirituality. That's where I spent a lot of my reading time. But on your recommendation, I will absolutely have to check that out.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how much of real life is distilled into fiction, and how much of an author you can understand through their pieces, and I think in that way fiction writers can serve as our teachers, and there's a bit of how to in some of that as well, because oh
Yep.
boy, I think I've read enough Stephen King to be a master of horror at this point. So
Absolutely. I mean, there's books like The Alchemist, The Go-Getter, The Go-Giver. They're all basically the Celestine Prophecy. These are all basically fictional works, but they do point to something, just as you said, spiritual truths or philosophies or things about life that we experience.
Yeah, like you actually bring me back to one of my favorite texts, which is The Richest Man in Babylon and the story of
Yes,
Arcad, and that I've always told people, if I have the soul of a free man, I'll get up, and it's these anecdotes that just they stick with us. So absolutely, for sure.
great example. Love it.
Yeah.
So you're also an activist. What sort of activism work are you doing?
So I think when you were asking me earlier about like my artistry, I kind of happened to touch about the Red Nation
Yes.
and red men and sort of what that means. And basically, I was born in Guatemala. I was born in Guatemala, and my family was sort of subject to the civil war that was going on. And as a result of that, we had to immigrate to Canada. So we came to Canada in 1992, and it was just me, my mom, and my brother at the time. And we stayed here, we lived here, and I grew up here. I grew up in Canada. As I got older, I kind of went through some hardship, and I was living on my own. I left home early, and I ended up getting adopted by the Onespot family. That's how I came to live on the land. And, and this is where I was able to reconnect with my Mayan culture through the teachings and the connection of community here, as well as like learn to center, understand the narrative, the stories, and the teachings of my brothers and sisters here. And it was really powerful for me because what I came to understand is that we're the same. We are the
Mm.
same in all the ways that we are different. And it was beautiful because I was so far from home, what I could call home, but I was still able to spend time with people that looked just like me and sound just like me, and they prayed like me, and they lived like me. And that's when I became passionate about, well, how can I take this journey that I'm on as a man and share it with the rest of the world. And I think right now with the orange guy doing what he's doing, like this conversation is extremely important.
Yes.
Uh, because like the stuff that's going on with ICE, like with the raids, the people that are in the detention camps, and it's not just affecting um, predominantly like Latin Americans anymore. Like they're snatching up Native Americans, and now there's all these videos on TikTok, and people are asking like, why is this going on? And it just kind of comes full circle to these things that I've come to understand. So, if I guess to answer your question in a short form, I'm an activist who believes in the Red Nation, who believes in the power of the Red people and the resurgence of our union as people from the North and the South. We call the North Turtle Island, and we call
Mm.
the South the Condor. So we're really trying to bring that Turtle Island and Condor back together and just be a one people. That's
Mm.
that's my thing. I
Very cool. How old were you when you had to move from Guatemala?
was only 4 years old, so it was
Okay.
1992 when we came here. Yeah, and our journey was not an easy one. It was tough. Like we came into the United States not legally, and through the congregation, so through the church, my mom was able to get some information about coming to Canada and getting help as refugees because we were victims of the Civil War. My
Mm.
mom actually was like quite hurt from the ordeal. So that's
Wow.
kind of what happened when we came up to Canada. She was able to like show them that we were not well, and then you know the the wonderful country of Canada opened its arms to us and brought us in, and that's kind of how it's been ever since.
Our stories have somewhat of a parallel there. I did not experience as much violence as you or your family did, clearly. But I was 5 when we moved to Japan, and I grew up there and survived the Great Hanshin earthquake. And after my dad passed away in an accident, motorbike accident, then we returned to Canada. It's always interesting who we attract in this group and the conversations we have.
Mm.
So what, as you see it, like what are, and I'm sure there's tons, but like what are the major challenges faced by the nations, the communities that you represent?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones is like lateral violence, right?
Mm.
Where like
Wow.
we have so much colonized, um, we carry a lot of pain, and then we've been shown this pain and this hurt, and then sometimes that bleeds out on people that are just like us, you know. And I think it's
Mm.
because it's comfortable. Because I'm gonna speak honestly here, when it's been an abuse that's ingrained in your people for so long, and that abuse is against you, how do you not turn it on those that look like you?
Yeah.
And this is taught, right? And that's sad because like we 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 seek this individualism within ourselves as a red nation, which is beautiful. Like we speak so many different languages, we have so many different ways, and this is beautiful because creator gave us this, you know. But I don't think the creator gave us that to push us apart. I think the creator gave it to us so that we could rejoice in all the ways that we can teach each other, you know. That my people call it mais, you know, and then some of the plains people will call it selu, right? But it's corn. And
Mm.
these are the things that I'm kind of talking about, right? And some of our ceremonies, like Sweat Lodge, pouring the water on the rocks. This is something that they do in Latin America commonly as well, but it's seen more as like a health practice. And so people are removed from the history and the culture of it, where it's like, no, this is a shared indigenous practice that is done all over North America in the Condor. So it's that kind of brings me back to that. Okay, well, you know, what makes us the same? Well, our ceremonies are have incredible parallels. You know, even things like the sun dance and the moon dance. And I remember like talking to a friend, a Mexican friend, and I told him, oh, you know, I finished my second year sun dancing. Oh, I have a friend down here who's a sun dancer. You guys have sun dance in Mexico? It's like, yeah. I have a friend, an elder named Johnny. He went and did a sun dance in Japan.
Huh.
They had a sun dance all the way over there in Japan because the people wanted to learn. And so he actually wears a yellow crown of sage, and that's the crown of sage that he had built when he did that Sundance with him. And he was just so honored as his experience over there that that's the crown that he wears every year when he sundances. So it's just really about bringing our people together. Like I think the Red Nation, you know, symbolically goes a lot further. Like when we talk about all people under the oppression of colonization, they're our brothers and sisters in spirit too. Like I say all the time, like, you know, our black brothers and sisters, like we understand they struggle like us, and they were colonized like us. Their culture was stolen just like us. So
Mm.
these are the things that I'm active, you know, that I believe in that activism. Yeah.
You spoke of the pain, and this is something I know about. I've heard from others, but there's no way I could know because I clearly there's a difference between knowing and knowing about. And there's a lot of things I only know about, don't claim to know.
Mhm.
How do you feel this could one day be resolved, or what steps are you taking to see that through?
You know, I had a really nasty incident where I was sort of like a target of lateral violence, and I had to figure out the
Hmm.
most effective and healthy way to navigate it, not just for myself personally, but also to be an example, you know. And the only thing that I came back to was just living in a spiritual way that was consistent with like my beliefs and my integrity, and just being very honest and transparent about my relationship with the nation. You know, like I live on the land, and that's such a blessing, and it's a gift. And I don't think that because I have brown skin or that I'm a red man that I'm entitled to my relationship with the community. I think it's the opposite. I think that because I have brown skin, red skin, and I'm on this land, that, you know, I really need to understand where my brothers and sisters come from. And being blessed to be adopted into a family is just even greater, that it brings me closer to those teachings. And I think there's a purpose for that, like a deeper spiritual purpose. That's my belief, that's my understanding.
Mm.
And yeah, like I just, do my best to conduct myself in a way that I think is healthy and congruent with protocol. I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of protocol.
Well, you'll have to share more with me. I'd be
Okay,
curious.
I'm glad because I kind of wanted to explain a little bit and like to I segued way into that. So
Yeah.
protocol is like our um sets of like rules and regulations regarding certain aspects of our ceremonial lives. So like
Huh.
the way the ceremony is conducted, who it's conducted by, where it's conducted, things like that. And the reason that protocol is important is because it preserves the sanctity of our culture and our people. And a thing is like neo-colonialism. Like you see a lot of people that I don't know if you've ever heard of like the whole explosion in Tulum where you have like a lot of expats who have gone down there and they've moved and sort of taken over the area and now it's
Yeah.
a place that caters more to the visitors of the area than the original inhabitants of the land. And if that's not colonialism, I'm not sure what is.
Mm.
Um, so that's a really big one that I'm kind of unpacking that one. That's it's tough.
Yeah. You mentioned sweat lodges. Like, what other sorts of things do you see as needing to be preserved and carried on through the generations?
Well, I one of my big things is like ceremonies never forsake. And that sometimes can be a tough one because we also are trying to navigate this world as red people in a way that's um, savvy with like, the material necessity of having to live in the world we live in. Um, it's not like the old ways. It just can't be. Colonialism has made it like that.
Mm.
So that I understand, but like there's times where you have to draw a line in the sand.
Yeah.
And I know some people will probably not be popular with what I'm about to say, but like things like cacao ceremony, where like you have people paying exorbitant amount of money to go on these retreats and they experience the power of this medicine, but because it's been paid for, because it's not expressed in the way that's integrate to the original teachings, like it's sort of diluted and it's appropriated, and I personally don't think it's right.
Mm.
um I know that I'm not in a position to really tell anybody what is right or wrong. I'm just a man, I'm just a person. But from my understanding, the teachings I've received, the things that I believe I understand about protocol, I don't think that's right. And I see it a
Yeah.
lot. And it's created a really one sided dynamic, I think, that's hard to ignore at this point.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, I know a little bit about these rituals, have experienced some of them, haven't spent oodles of money doing it, fortunately, but I have
Mhm.
no idea whether the essence, the truth of it has been preserved in those circles, right?
Mhm.
And it's just hard to know.
Yeah, it's so difficult when like, you have these big organizations that are popping up online and they're presenting this Mayan wisdom and information, and you can buy a membership and read all the resources per month, and next thing you know a person's a daykeeper, and it's, to be frank, it's insulting and it's
Yeah.
really hurtful. And I don't think some people understand how it's hurtful. Like you said, like if you don't navigate or you don't know that pain, it's alien, right? But it's real to
Yeah.
us. And then when we see that stuff, it's hurtful for lots of us, for the spiritual people, for the spiritual men. I see that stuff. I'm talking about it now, and I want to cry, because they already took everything, and they keep taking. Like,
Yeah.
when is enough enough? I hope that some people watching that are like connected to communities that way hear me and hear the pain in my voice. That it's not that we don't want to teach. It's not that we don't want to share. It's that it's ours. And that's not being respected. And I think that's part of the activism side of things when I say the red nation. it's not about standing against everyone else. It's that we need to stand up because we're still getting squished down, and that's hard. You know,
Yeah,
that's hard.
absolutely. And I mean, I don't want to water down anything you just said. Like, that's perfect as it is. I just wanted to say, like, I think one reference point artists would certainly understand is if their song was taken and someone made it a really huge hit and they never got credit for it, or if someone took your book idea, or maybe your manuscript, made a big hit off of it without you ever getting credit, there is a sense of violation that would come from that. Like, if it wasn't a big deal, if they were making 2 cents off of the royalties, you'd kind of be like, okay, the song sucked. Like, I don't care. But if it became a big hit, your sense of what that violation would be a completely different story.
Oh yeah, for sure. And like, even the idea that like so many of our sacred items are like sitting in museums thousands of miles from home, and
Right.
someone
Huh.
someone pays to Google at it, and it should be home. It should be with the grandmas and the grandpas. So I mean, it for us it feels like something that seems so obvious from what we've been taught, what we learn, what we understand as indigenous people. But again, like this material world that we live in, it's just the power of the almighty dollar, and you can just put a price on anything these days. And I guess that goes for the teachings too, and that's
Mm.
what we're seeing. So it's something that I think you have to be wary of from the side of the student as well, from the participant, from the person who's also like gathering this information to really take a step back sometimes and say, hey, like, you know, does it make more sense for me to go spend time on the land and connect with people in a good way? Or should I, spend this 2 grand to go on this cacao trip? I hope that people think about that decision a little deeper if they're with us today.
Really good point. Really good point. You also have a school, is that right?
Yeah. So it's the physical school is in the making. It's in the building. So like, I as people can see from my studio setup, it's a little different, and that's because I'm actually in a school bus, so I live in a schoolie, and there's the first building that I got to build for the school. I'm going to build a meeting center. I'm going to build a classroom, and for the past 2 years, I've been running land-based programming off out of the Tsuut'ina Nation, off the land that my adopted parents own. It's called the Onespot Crossing Campground. I've been blessed to work with so many different groups. I've worked with the Eagle Scouts of Calgary. I've worked with the Girl Guides of Calgary. I've just been able to, bring the magic of Indigenous learning to so many different types of people. And my goal is to just have like a physical location where people can come and participate in a curriculum year round that just helps them get closer to the land.
Yeah. It's an amazing project. I love it, and I hope that goes really smoothly for you.
It's definitely a labor of love. Like
Mm.
I have to put all my construction knowledge to the test. But it's also a beautiful thing to be able to do that. And I didn't have a good history with education growing up.
Yeah.
I was kind of always a little bit of an oddball. And you get to work with these youth, and you can see these kids who are different, and you get the opportunity to work with them and tell them like, hey, you're actually super cool, like you're really cool, man. And the way that it just changes people, and the influence and the impact you can have. And when you pair this with the teachings as well, like it's just a beautiful thing. See a bunch of little guys make their first drum, and okay, it's time to sing a song. The next day comes, and they get up first thing in the morning, and they're already playing and singing without you. Like it's a beautiful thing. So
100%. And I'm guessing like we have people in the group that would relate to this also. But for me, elementary school was mostly drawing mazes and video game concepts and manga or comic books. Japanese equivalent would be manga. And then in junior high and high school, it was like me writing horrible lyrics, awful lyrics, but I learned to rhyme. I learned to put the words together, and eventually got to the point where I could write a proper song. So it was all practice, and it was all leading somewhere. But as far as the traditional education system goes, like I may have gotten passing grades. At times, I may have gotten better than passing grades, but they were never extraordinary, and I was not fully engaged in that. I took as many art courses as they would let me, and try to do as few math and science courses as I could.
Yeah,
That was
like
just
I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
no, that's okay. That was just my tendency. I was gonna say.
Yeah, I think andragogy and pedagogy are such abstract concepts when it comes to the traditional ways that we learned as indigenous people.
Hmm.
And then you hold these metrics against the people who have learned a certain way for thousands of years, and you ask a fish why it can't fly, or you ask an eagle why it can't swim, you know.
Hmm.
And I think that's so important. Like when being on the land and being able to learn with your hands, or it's one thing. Oh, tell these kids, spruce gum is useful. It's another thing when they see me take it and stick it in my mouth and chew it like a piece of gum. Why are you doing that? We used to clean our teeth like that, And they see the practicality of it, or I'll have a bug bite while we're going on the medicine. I'll chew up a piece of yarrow and stick it on there. Oh, why'd you do that? Oh, it's good for my bug bite. So they get to see, like, it's really nice, and their the child's ability to learn so fast. Like I remember we did like a plant identification one time. Okay, you're looking for this and blah, blah, blah. I want everyone to raise their hand once they found what we're looking for. It took less than 30 seconds. So it's just about getting them in the right space, getting them in the right environment, and getting them passionate about learning, giving
Hmm.
them the opportunity to do it in the old way, and you'd be surprised at the results. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's fascinating because part of my journey too was the most useful, valuable stuff I ended up learning in books and audio programs, not in school, right? Not that school was completely useless. I think it should be better than it is really where I'm coming from.
Mm,
And it does provide somewhat of a foundation, but the foundation is more or less like let's memorize things. And memorizing things and being right about things sort of becomes the marker that we measure our life by.
mhm.
And it's not a good marker once you really get out into the real world.
No, like I use one um one remark often with people that really really strikes them, because we don't often think about it, but you know in this journey that we go through that we call life, and we learn all these really important lessons,
Hmm.
when they're handed down to us from people that we really care about, that we love, the elders, the things that really stick with you, right? Oftentimes, what form do those lessons come in? They come in the form of a story.
Yeah.
Storytelling is such a powerful and intrinsic part of us as human beings. It's just, there's nothing I love more than getting people around a sacred fire, and sharing a good traditional story, and just watching the different generations as they all pull something different out of what I've said, you
Hmm.
know, and how they'll take that forward and they'll share that too. And it's something that I hope sticks with people moving forward, that, there are different ways to learn and be in this world, and live on the land. I mean, it would be lovely if there was like a way for most people who live within the city to be able to experience that life. But it's a blessing and it's a gift, and I'm aware of that. But we're here and we're open, and you guys can always come visit us.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think I've driven by many times and used to live in Calgary, so yeah. I had a thought, but kind of escaped me for the moment. Well, one other thing that you did mention in your pre-interview was about the impact and the difference you've made in Alberta.
Yeah.
Love, tell us about that.
Well, I've stopped and I've started as an artist so many times. And I really started this hip hop journey a really long time ago. Like
Mm,
I used to have different rap monikers, which I'm not going to repeat right now because I'm just extremely embarrassed. But I was always really involved in the hip hop scene in Calgary in its infancy, and we did a lot of work to help bring bring it to where it is now. And I remember when we were first, trying to do shows and bring artists to the city, we were lucky if we had one or two hip hop shows a year. I'm really proud to say that we got like, 4 or 5 artists coming a month nowadays, right? So it's just beautiful that the city has grown in that way, come to accept the medium and shed a bit of its Western like cowboy image, in some ways, because we're not all like that, and there's a ton of talent, and that was sort of my involvement. And then you know you, we mentioned Wakefield as well, who is a good
yeah.
friend of both of ours, and being so blessed to be able to occupy and share spaces with him in the spoken word community, where like we first kind of bumped heads when there was like these open mics, and spoken word was just kind of getting popular in Calgary. And then you got guys like Wakefield who show up all of a sudden, and you're like, there's professionals here, man. Like we're in the presence of some mastery. And for myself, like going back to that whole being a student thing, and just he's my friend, but I learned from him too. Like constantly watching, right? So
Yeah.
that was a big part of it too. So just always being there as a part of community, and then taking some time off to sort of like get with these teachings and get with the land and come out here and do what I'm doing with the school. But this is also part of like my artistry as well. And I think it's just kind of all evolving and coming full circle to this point where, you know, I was so blessed to participate in the genesis of all these communities in Calgary. And now I'm sort of like sitting in this position where I'm able to, like, people like Wakefield, like bring new talent in, and
Mm.
examine this other stuff and take what I would call like my journeyman's mastery of things, and expose myself to the world and my art in a new way. And I feel refreshed about it. I feel good about it. I feel blessed about it. And yeah, I'm looking forward to so many things, so many things on the horizon.
I'm really glad to hear that the hip hop scene is growing there. It's good to see. There are pockets, right, of different talent in Calgary that deserves more spotlights. That's being one of them. There's also the singer-songwriter and acoustic community that's just surprisingly quality musicians there, many of whom are my friends in the jazz arena as well. Rock and metal is maybe a little less surprising because it's in some ways derivative of blues and then country and western and roots and so on and so forth. But rock is not a you can make okay money as a cover band or tribute band. It's not really the kind of thing that has a lot of clout in Canada. It seems like the best rock bands that I know in Canada usually don't play in Canada.
Mm.
Weirdly enough. The other comment, I remember what I said I was going to say earlier, which was about stories, because you made a really great point about that. When I'm not taking guests live in our Facebook group, I'm usually telling one story or another. And I do it because through practice, I can either tell the story in a better way or more succinct way or in a way that connects with people more. And I
Mm.
feel like that's one of the most valuable things I could do when I don't have a guest is to share these stories and people are free to take what they want to take from those.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Wakefield using a statement the other day where he said like we lead with words,
Mm,
no matter who we are and what we do, and with all the negativity in the world, it's allowed because people can speak well. I can speak too, and I think that's the power we all have,
yeah.
and the power of the prayer through word when things touch the air and how we speak, you know, the story that exists in the structure of sentence. It's minute, but it's there, and that's the micro and the macro of it all. And it's just really beautiful that we get to exist in a way where, expression through word is what it is, you know. Maybe there's places and universes and dimensions where that's not a thing,
Mm.
so we exist in that here, and I think that's really great.
I'm frequently reminded of that too, right? Because how I show up here in this space is not completely just my words. It's obviously my body language and how I present because people do notice those things. But it also has a lot to do with what I'm saying and with what emphasis I'm saying. So I'm reminded of that all the time, whether it's writing a book or writing a blog post or coming live like this. The words really do matter.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I spend a lot of time on the land, and it's like, even the things that our four-legged friends or our two-legged friends say doesn't come across to us as language because, it's not the same as we do things. It has meaning as well, and this is part
Mm,
of what the ancients and the old ones knew too. And, I think that's probably the birth of song, if
mm.
if we learned, because well, who, if anyone, taught us to sing, it was the birds, I think. They were our first relatives, right?
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
Well, this is your platform, Balam. Anything that you'd like to share or say in closing, or anything else that you'd like to ask?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm so happy that you have me. I'm so happy for everyone that's been able to be here with us and participate. I'm a person who speaks very earnestly from my heart, and I will always be honest, maybe to a fault. So, I'm very happy that we had this interview. But if at any time I stumbled or I faulted, please be patient with me. I'll plug myself a bit. I do have
Yes.
an Instagram. It's official YYC,
Okay.
all one word. And then I have a YouTube as well, which is also official YYC. And that's where I've been releasing all this new music. So I think those will primarily be the platforms where you can kind of keep up with me. And my goal is to just create like meaningful connections with people who interact with my art. So, I'm always present. I'm always willing to engage. I'm always ready to answer questions, and I see people as supporters and friends more than fans. I really dislike that word. So please, if
Mm,
you're willing to support me, I'm down to figure out what it takes for all of us to get my message across, because it's I think it's a beautiful thing that I have to say, and I'm willing to say it, on behalf of the people. And with that being said, I love everyone from the bottom of my heart. So that's me. That's Balam.
awesome. Perfect. We'll try to get your links in the show notes as well. And look, you're welcome back anytime. I enjoyed this conversation, and maybe we'll even get you on a Thursday night with more co-hosts and cohorts involved. But either way, you are welcome back.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much, David.
Thank you. And thank you, Spark Infinity, for watching, whether you're watching now or in replay. You're a total rock star if you're watching it in replay. Do comment and let us know. Thank you so much.